Welcome back to Iraqi Dinar Today latest news. For a considerable time now, our dedicated reporting has focused on the complex, often opaque world of global currency reform, with a sharp focus on the economic transformation underway in the Republic of Iraq. The discussions surrounding Iraq's financial path have frequently been driven by speculation, rumors, and unverified theories regarding the future trajectory of its national currency, the dinar. However, a recent highly significant development has occurred, one that numerous financial observers and analysts are characterizing as a monumental turning point in the history of Iraq's financial infrastructure. This is not merely a piece of interesting news, it represents a fundamental shift in the very nature of the dinar conversation. The narrative is now transitioning decisively away from conjecture and onto a solid basis of documented legal fact. The development in question centers on the Iraqi Gazette, which functions as the nation's definitive, official record for all governmental legislation, statutes, and decrees. This authoritative source has formally released the full, detailed text of a keenly anticipated legislative measure. This measure is now becoming widely known and discussed under the informal title of the New Force Step Exchange Law. Public dissemination of this finalized legal document is a game changer because it provides a verified, government-sanctioned blueprint for the structural evolution of the nation's entire monetary framework. Up until this point, analysts and interested parties were left to construct their understanding from partial drafts, veiled central bank pronouncements, and anecdotal reports. The publication of this law offers a tangible, reviewable foundation, suggesting that Iraq is moving past the stage of theoretical financial planning and is now firmly in a phase of legal codification and preparatory action. The historical dialogue concerning the dinar's eventual future has traditionally been a complicated mix. It involved serious, high-level macroeconomic analysis, consideration of the volatile geopolitical context of the region, and, undeniably, a significant element of aspirational storytelling driven by market hopes. For years, stakeholders worldwide have meticulously scrutinized vague public statements from Iraq's monetary authorities, attempted to interpret ambiguous legislative outlines, and filtered through countless secondary news items to piece together a likely path for the currency. This diverse collection of sources, which ranged from reliable economic indicators to unverified whispers, unfortunately created an informational landscape riddled with both genuinely insightful commentary and a substantial amount of misleading noise and distortion. The formal emergence of this finalized legal blueprint, clearly articulating institutional responsibilities, established procedures, and core principles, fundamentally reorders this chaotic backdrop. The formal appearance of this comprehensive law in the Iraqi Gazette is far more than a simple, mundane bureaucratic procedure. It is a powerful, intentional signal from the Iraqi government indicating a determined transition. This move signifies that the government is fully engaged in implementing legally binding frameworks rather than remaining in a state of indefinite consideration. In the complex world of sovereign finance and global monetary policy, the specific language contained within enacted legislation holds immense weight and importance. It is the legal text that clearly establishes lines of responsibility, creates procedural steps that are enforceable by law, and communicates governmental intent in a way that anonymous, circulating rumors simply cannot achieve. If this new law effectively clarifies how the national currency will be officially classified, how exchange processes will be systematically managed by state institutions, and how regulatory bodies will handle oversight and compliance, stakeholders have gained something critically valuable for their long-term planning. With the publication of this document, those observing Iraq's financial developments now possess a concrete, verifiable framework that significantly aids in assessing options and preparing for practical implications of any future monetary decisions. However, it is fundamentally crucial to temper any rising sense of optimism with a necessary degree of caution and prudence. The act of reviewing a law, especially one focused on financial reform, demands a keen understanding of the precise legal language used. One must carefully discern the difference between enabling language, which essentially grants permission for an action to take place at some future date, and immediate mandates, which unequivocally require an action to be implemented right now. Financial and legal reform is almost always an incremental process, frequently requiring the passage of subsequent rules, additional regulatory actions, and often substantial international coordination before any tangible, significant market shifts can actually manifest. In essence, the presence of such formal, detailed legal language within the Iraqi Gazette is a substantive, crucial development that dramatically reduces a significant portion of the uncertainty that has characterized the market for years. Yet, this legal formalization does not automatically, instantaneously translate into a guaranteed immediate market outcome specifically, the immediate payout or rapid change many are hoping for. Interested parties should treat this official blueprint as a potent and meaningful signal that necessitates careful evidence-based planning and realistic analysis, rather than as a definitive, unchallengeable confirmation of a specific, immediate timeline or guaranteed financial result. For international observers, particularly those focused on the possibility of a currency revaluation or significant value shift, this legal codification represents the clearest indication yet that the future movement of the currency is not a question of if, but rather a more nuanced question of when and in what specific form that eventual movement will be structurally organized and officially executed. However, the excitement surrounding this legal text must be carefully managed and tempered by a rigorous, analytical examination of the law itself. It is paramount that this complex document is approached not with the mindset of a lottery ticket holder, but rather as a genuine piece of sophisticated financial legislation. Such legislation, by its nature, requires a series of distinct technical and operational steps to be fully realized and effectively implemented within the intricate framework of the Iraqi national economy. For many long-time watchers of the dinar, especially those based outside of Iraq who have followed the speculative chatter for years, this official legal text provides an entirely new, concrete axis of analysis. While internet forum discussions and circulating rumors have largely offered anecdotal information and speculation, the legal language provides concrete, reviewable obligations, delegates specific authorities, and establishes clear, procedural steps that can be meticulously evaluated from a strict compliance and institutional perspective. Furthermore, stakeholders outside of Iraq, particularly those in jurisdictions like the United States, must consider the crucial interplay between any official Iraqi legal changes and the myriad of domestic financial regulations. This includes, but is not limited to, American tax law, strict reporting requirements for foreign currency holdings, and established banking regulations. This demands a nuanced, multi-layered interpretation of the new Iraqi law. It requires looking through the lens of the monetary and macroeconomic intentions embedded in the legal draft itself, assessing the genuine operational capabilities of Iraqi financial institutions to actually implement the required steps, gauging the probable reaction of international partners and global financial markets, and finally, understanding the inevitable ripple effect for holders of both physical and digital dinar located outside of the country's borders. These considerations are all vital for prudent preparation. It is also critically important to dissect the specific language within the law to determine if the text establishes a legally binding schedule for any eventual conversion or exchange process, or if it merely acts to authorize the Central Bank of Iraq to adopt further detailed rules and regulations at some unspecified point in the future. In reviewing this essential text, one must ask highly critical questions. Are there explicit conditions attached to international monetary assistance programs, agreements with the International Monetary Fund (IMF), or specific fiscal policy milestones that must be demonstrably met before the law's most consequential provisions can be activated? These distinctions between an enabling statute and a concrete, immediate roadmap matter enormously because they determine whether the law is merely a sophisticated permission slip for future rule-making, or if it is a foundational decree that immediately triggers administrative and operational actions by government bodies. Consequently, international readers should utilize the law primarily as a robust and consequential data point. It is a profoundly meaningful and potentially world-changing piece of the puzzle, but it still remains just one element within a much broader mosaic. That mosaic must necessarily include an assessment of Iraq's operational capacity, the current political will to execute such sweeping changes, and the often lengthy process of international coordination required to integrate with global finance. Above all, any immediate sense of excitement should be rigorously tempered by sober, fact-based analysis and the seeking of professional, impartial counsel. This is to ensure that individuals make choices consistent with the evolving legal realities, and that they adhere to prudent, long-term financial planning principles. The ultimate purpose of dissecting the law, clause by clause and provision by provision, is not to extinguish the underlying hope many hold, but rather to methodically replace conjecture and unverified information with genuine, verifiable comprehension, thereby allowing for a far more realistic and grounded view of the financial landscape. When statutory texts are examined with the requisite level of professional scrutiny, one often finds that provisions tend to fall into three distinct conceptual categories. The first category comprises broad policy statements, which serve primarily to signal political intent and overarching goals. The second category contains enabling clauses, which formally delegate the authority for creating detailed rules to a specific ministry or government agency. The third category involves procedural mandates, which are the most concrete, creating specific, measurable steps and often establishing firm timelines for action. Each of these categories carries significantly different practical implications for the future of the dinar. A high-level policy statement, while signaling political direction, does not by itself change the day-to-day operations of the market or banking system. An enabling clause, though a prerequisite for any eventual operational change, typically requires substantial subsequent regulatory action. This subsequent action involves time-consuming processes such as the drafting of implementing regulations, the issuing of internal procedures for banks, and the development of necessary technical infrastructure before any material outcomes change for the end user. Procedural mandates, in sharp contrast, can often be acted upon much more swiftly and directly because they establish concrete, defined steps and immediately assign explicit responsibilities to specific government entities. The critical analytical exercise for all stakeholders is to accurately identify which parts of this new law fall into which of these three distinct categories to gain a realistic understanding of the potential timeline for full implementation. Furthermore, it is illuminating to look beyond the literal text of the law and analyze how this new legislation is structured to interact with Iraq's existing key institutions. This includes the Central Bank of Iraq, the Ministry of Finance, and various supervisory or auditing bodies. Understanding these institutional relationships provides additional clarity regarding the overall feasibility and mechanism of implementation. Finally, for anyone considering making a move, it is absolutely essential to distinguish the legally authorized pathways established in this law from the numerous informal or purely rumor-driven channels that exist in the market. The aim of a step-by-step analysis of this legislation is to illuminate those precise distinctions, highlighting where the law genuinely creates actual, actionable mechanisms versus where it merely signals an intention or a political goal. We must determine what each provision would practically require to implement and how each element might materially affect the millions of holders of the dinar, both within Iraq's borders and throughout the international community. By systematically evaluating these critical points, external observers can substantially reduce the surrounding informational noise and begin to construct a reasoned, evidence-based perspective that is firmly rooted in documented, official legal change. Now, let us turn our attention to the first major component of this comprehensive new legislation: the official redefinition of what legally constitutes an exchangeable currency. This first step, as outlined in the law, is entirely foundational, and its importance cannot be overstated. By fundamentally recasting the official legal definition of what is recognized as an exchangeable currency, the new law is effectively reshaping the baseline rules that govern legitimacy in both domestic Iraqi markets and across international financial forums. This is a crucial, technical step towards global integration and compliance with international banking norms. This crucial redefinition can encompass a wide range of specific dimensions. It may involve formally specifying the only acceptable issuance authority, precisely determining which notes or coins are officially deemed legal tender, clarifying the exact role of any commemorative or now obsolete denominations, outlining detailed authentication and serial number verification procedures, and formally enumerating the specific certifications required for currency to be accepted at a bank grade level. These granular elements are significant because they set the standards for what institutions, both within Iraq and globally, will be legally compelled to accept for formal exchange purposes. If the law, for instance, narrows the forms of acceptable tender to only specific, newer series of banknotes or sets explicit technical standards for the acceptable condition of the currency, then holders of older notes or those in poor condition need to be immediately aware of these forthcoming shifts and prepare accordingly. Conversely, a law that is structured to broaden the acceptable criteria, or one that explicitly authorizes the formal conversion of previously non-exchangeable instruments under highly controlled, structured procedures, could potentially open new pathways for wider inclusion of currency holdings. The legal language may also contain a mandate that the Central Bank of Iraq or a designated authority is required to publicly publish comprehensive lists, issue specific identification guides, and implement large-scale public awareness campaigns designed to drastically reduce any potential confusion regarding which notes are officially valid and which are not. Operationalizing this kind of sweeping redefinition is a massive logistical undertaking. It requires intensive training for all bank staff, updating currency identification scanners, building secure verification databases, and designing highly secure transit and storage protocols, all of which inevitably affect the practical timeline for implementation. Ultimately, the act of legally redefining what constitutes an exchangeable currency is not a merely symbolic gesture. It systematically reorders market reality. However, the smooth transition between a formal statutory definition and actual, practical market acceptance depends critically on the clarity of the laws, technical standards, and the institutional capacity of the responsible agencies to execute the transition without introducing destructive ambiguity or creating severe logistical bottlenecks. By formally codifying these new currency classification requirements, Iraq is proactively modernizing its internal monetary laws to align them with universally accepted international practices. The new legislation meticulously spells out the precise characteristics a currency, and specifically the dinar, must possess to be formally recognized for exchange purposes. These characteristics include stringent issuance standards, clear backing requirements, defined transparency measures, and explicit oversight by the Central Bank of Iraq. Each of these components carries profound technical and legal implications that deserve careful, separate unpacking. Issuance standards determine which specific printing series, denominations, and authorized signatures legally confer official status. Backing requirements outline what, if anything, is officially held in reserve or utilized to support the value claims of the currency. Transparency measures could necessitate public reporting, official audit trails, or internationally accessible registries, Finally, explicit oversight by the central bank establishes a singular, clear point of institutional and regulatory responsibility. Bringing these diverse components into a clear statutory form signals an unambiguous intention to harmonize Iraq's domestic monetary governance with the exacting expectations of global investors, major correspondent banks, and multilateral financial institutions. This intended harmonization serves a critical purpose. It can dramatically reduce friction in international, cross-border transactions because it provides international counterparties with far clearer assurances regarding authenticity, verifiable regulatory backing, and established dispute resolution channels. Yet, merely declaring these standards in a new law is only the very first step. Full implementation requires the development of crystal clear technical specifications, the building of robust institutional capacity, and the establishment of rigorous ongoing compliance monitoring. For example, if the stated backing requirements refer to foreign reserve holdings or commodity-linked instruments, then auditability and transparency in reporting those assets become central to maintaining international credibility. If transparency measures officially mandate the release of public reports, then the precise timing, content, and accessibility of those reports matter enormously to the global financial community that is closely watching these developments. In summary, this modernization through codification is vital because it sets the necessary preconditions for greater international acceptance and recognition of the dinar. However, these preconditions will only positively impact the market if they are implemented with technical rigor and a high degree of fidelity to the law's intent. The law also includes notable references to international guidelines published by influential institutions such as the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the Bank for International Settlements, BIS. This is a noteworthy signal in itself, as it indicates Iraq's express intention to integrate its monetary practices with recognized global financial norms. Referencing external frameworks creates a necessary expectation of compatibility, which can significantly ease interactions with crucial correspondent banking systems and global multilateral lenders. The IMF and other international standard-setting bodies provide a comprehensive set of best practices regarding monetary policy transparency, reserve reporting, anti-money laundering protocols, and bank supervision. When a domestic law explicitly leverages or references these internationally accepted norms, it signals at least a rhetorical commitment to high standards of transparency, rigorous reporting, and external validation of its practices. For international actors, such explicit references can substantially reduce perceived policy risk by indicating that reforms will adhere to tested, methodological approaches rather than ad hoc or idiosyncratic practices. Practically, however, the mere citation of international guidelines is not equivalent to instant or automatic compliance. True integration requires thorough audits, intensive capacity building, detailed statutory alignments, and ongoing cooperative processes that can realistically span many months or even years. Partner institutions may require demonstrable proof of implementation, such as the publication of verified audit reports, clear evidence of verifiable reserve holdings, or demonstrable, functional upgrades to central bank governance, before they respond with technical assistance or agree to alter their operational terms regarding the Iraqi dinar. Nevertheless, the strategic inclusion of language referencing the IMF and BIS provides an essential framing device. It communicates clearly to international markets that Iraq intends to abide by widely understood and accepted global rules. For stakeholders, this matters because it raises the probability that any significant future monetary actions, whether they involve revaluation, redenomination, or operational reform, will be meticulously scrutinized through standard global channels, making it more likely that the consequences of change will be navigated in collaboration with external authorities rather than in isolation. This suggests that Iraq is constructing the fundamental structural groundwork for greater global visibility, a necessary foundation for any future valuation shift to be internationally embraced. The fundamental distinction between domestic legal reform and genuine international acceptance remains critical to grasp. Domestic statutes possess the authority to organize and authorize local activities within the country's borders. But true international acceptance is fundamentally dependent on global correspondent banks, foreign regulators, large custodial institutions, and often multilateral lenders being fully willing to engage under the new rules. Holders of the dinar should therefore view the new law as an important preliminary step. It successfully creates the necessary legal scaffolding that could enable profound operational changes. But it does not, by itself, guarantee that foreign governments or global markets will immediately accept a new valuation or a redenomination without conducting their own exhaustive due diligence. Practical barriers, such as rigorous compliance checks, sanction screening, detailed prudence verification, and complex tax reporting, will inevitably continue to shape how foreign institutions handle dinar-related flows in the coming period. Furthermore, those holding dinar outside of Iraq must also carefully consider the domestic legal implications in their own country, including the explicit reporting obligations and the potential for scrutiny if large volumes of currency are moved across international borders. The second crucial step of the new law focuses on establishing an official, structured framework for exchange rate adjustments. And this section is arguably the most closely watched among international currency observers and investors. Here, the law meticulously defines a formal, authorized system for precisely how the Central Bank of Iraq is permitted to officially publish, update, or fundamentally alter the dinar's exchange rate. The legal codification of an exchange rate framework is immensely significant because currency valuation is always a complex function of both underlying market dynamics and institutional monetary policy. When a central bank is granted explicit statutory authority to manage exchange rates under strictly prescribed protocols, it dramatically reduces the inherent ambiguity that has long surrounded the dinar. Such a framework clarifies precisely who has the authority to act, the precise mandatory procedures they must follow, and the specific checks and balances that accompany that critical authority. The law may require the official promulgation of rules regarding the exact timing of public announcements, the authorized communication channels used to share rate changes, and the mandatory documentation needed to legally justify an adjustment. By creating these institutional and procedural guardrails, the legislator's clear intention is to prevent abrupt, poorly documented, or unilateral shifts that could cause widespread market disruption or invite accusations of political manipulation. For market participants, having a statutory framework can instill a measure of crucial predictability by clarifying the necessary circumstances under which rate changes may legitimately occur. These circumstances might include a response to inflationary pressures, verifiable changes in foreign reserves, or formal international agreements, and the clear procedural steps that must be strictly followed. Nevertheless, the ultimate practical implications of this second step will depend heavily on the level of explicit discretion granted to the central bank, the precise criteria specified for triggering action, and the actual capacity of the central bank to effectively coordinate its actions with other domestic agencies and with key international partners. If the law explicitly couples exchange rate authority with robust, comprehensive transparency obligations, then it can successfully build long-term credibility. Conversely, if it grants overly wide discretion without clear accountability, then a degree of uncertainty will regrettably persist. This analytical perspective leads directly to the operational reality of the second step. It is not merely procedural, it is fundamentally about establishing clear authority, promoting transparency, and building a foundation of trustworthiness. The central bank must now officially follow standardized, documented protocols before announcing any rate changes. These protocols include requirements for advanced public notification, formalized documentation procedures, and institutional coordination with international bodies such as the IMF. Moreover, any significant exchange rate modification must be widely and publicly published through official, verified platforms, including the Iraqi Gazette, official digital government portals, and international news systems. While the law deliberately avoids setting a specific calendar date for any potential changes, it clearly outlines the essential mechanism for those changes. Iraq is effectively declaring that any future shifts in the dinar's value will be lawful, transparent, and internationally coordinated, moving away from sudden or secretive shocks to the financial system. This explicit set of institutional commitments is profoundly meaningful because it successfully reframes potential monetary action from an arena of rumor-driven speculation into a structure governed by clear, institutionally managed processes. Requirements for advanced notification and meticulous documentation greatly reduce the possibility of sudden, destabilizing surprise announcements that could harm both external and domestic markets. Simultaneously, coordination with international bodies helps to ensure technical rigor and lends crucial external credibility to the decisions being made. Requiring official publication on verifiable channels makes it significantly more difficult for misinformation to spread and far easier for international counterparties to verify the legitimacy of any announced changes. Importantly, however, the intentional absence of a specific date signals a deliberate separation between the authorization to act and the execution of that action. Lawmakers are granting the central bank the necessary tools to act, while simultaneously avoiding preset timelines to retain the essential flexibility required in a dynamic financial environment. The third step of the new law concentrates on external engagement by explicitly creating legal channels for the international interaction with the dinar. This essential portion of the legislation defines the precise terms for how foreign banks, major global exchanges, and various digital platforms can legally and officially interact with the Iraqi currency. This is a critical component for effectively linking Iraq's domestic currency system with the wider global market. The law clarifies exactly who is authorized to conduct dinar-related transactions and formally establishes stringent reporting requirements, verification procedures, and the necessary digital safeguards. Notably, the text includes forward-looking language that allows for the future integration of the dinar with secure digital ledger technologies and blockchain-based systems. This eventual integration could allow international institutions and online financial platforms to legally offer dinar transactions within a formal, regulated environment, signaling Iraq's readiness to make the dinar more accessible and fundamentally compatible with the modern global financial system. The fourth and final step tackles the persistent, long-standing issues of fraud, manipulation, and black market trading through the introduction of strict anti-fraud measures and compliance enforcement. This section of the law introduces detailed compliance rules designed to restore institutional integrity and trustworthiness to Iraq's entire monetary ecosystem. The requirements include mandatory audit trails for all large volume exchanges, mandatory reporting requirements for all institutions that handle the dinar, and the creation of a brand new oversight authority armed with broad investigative and enforcement powers. Penalties for violations under this new regime are substantial, ranging from heavy financial fines to complete license revocation, and even the possibility of criminal prosecution. By significantly strengthening enforcement, Iraq aims to demonstrate its seriousness and commitment to international observers. This effort is not merely about preventing misconduct. It is fundamentally about actively building institutional credibility, which is essential if Iraq hopes to successfully attract foreign investment and participate effectively in the global financial system on stable and widely accepted terms. It is also necessary to briefly address the critical topic of redenomination, to clarify frequent misconceptions that circulate within the dinar community. A frequent source of confusion is the misunderstanding of the fundamental difference between redenomination and devaluation, as they are entirely distinct concepts. Redenomination is purely a recalibration of the currency's denominations. It is the technical act of retiring IQD notes and replacing them with notes of a smaller numerical value e.g., retiring a 25,000 dinar note and introducing a 25 dinar note without altering the currency's real purchasing power or underlying value. The underlying value remains the same, only the numbers change. This measure is common in countries recovering from inflationary periods and is intended to streamline commerce, enhance financial literacy, and improve anti-counterfeiting protections. For holders of the dinar, especially those abroad, this action does not reduce the underlying value of their holdings, but rather reflects Iraq's ongoing effort to modernize and simplify its currency landscape. Finally, with the understanding that even the most well-crafted reforms can only succeed if they are fully understood by the public, Iraq has concurrently launched a significant nationwide education and public awareness campaign. This comprehensive effort utilizes multiple communication channels, including television, radio, newspapers, and local community meetings, where detailed information is being actively shared in multiple languages and local dialects. Government officials, respected economists, and community figures are all actively engaged in explaining the new law, thoroughly addressing common misconceptions, and providing clear guidance to help build an informed public that can confidently navigate the upcoming transition. Simultaneously, global markets have visibly begun to take notice. Banks in the Gulf region, major firms in Asia, and significant international financial institutions are actively reassessing Iraq's economic trajectory. This reassessment is largely underpinned by Iraq's robust foreign currency reserves, which are currently at their strongest level in more than 2 decades. While this does not automatically indicate an immediate dramatic movement, it powerfully confirms that Iraq's financial system is rapidly maturing and successfully attracting serious, significant global attention.